I'm with the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship, and we host a large conference on worship every January. I'm sorry we cannot plan weather like this in January, but every January, about 1,500, 1,600 people come from around the world to worship together and to study and fellowship over the issues of worship. And every year it's become more and more international, and we have developed a scholarship program, and I have copies of this information. So if you would like to come from your home country, if you can provide transportation, we will take care of all of your expenses for 5 days while you are at the symposium. We will pay your hotel costs, the registration, all your meals for 10 people per country. Ann Zaki is on our staff. You met her this morning when she introduced WAGI, and she is our international host, and her email address is given here. So if you are able to come yourself, wonderful, but take one of these little announcements to pass on to people in your communities, in your church communities, and I hope that you will be able to join us next year. This past January, we had representatives from 34 countries who came. It greatly enriched our time of worship together. I'll be here afterwards, and here's a stack of information.
Just outside of our conference room here, Larry and Linda Hogerheit are handing out tickets for the various events and for the bus rides to the Van Andel Arena tomorrow. Can we ask our panelists to come up, please? You may decide how whether you want to stand up at the podium and talk or whether you want to talk from here. What we have done is asked these people to be listening throughout the conference to you, to the plenary sessions, to the workshops, be reading the summaries of the workshops that we've received thus far, and to say, what have we been hearing? We want this very much to be a working conference. I've been to so many conferences where, you know, you attend workshops, you hear the plenaries, and you get all excited, and then you wonder what happens with the information. And so we don't want that to be the case for what we've done here. That's why we provided you with the book that we did and try to work in advance so that we would get as much of the information prior to the conference. And so that information will be available online in PDF files, and we will also make available all of the workshops. They're all recorded. We'll have to do some editing. I know the one that I was in, there was long pauses, of course, when people were in small groups, so that would be a little hard to capture. But we had each of the groups report out, and so that we'll be able to capture all of that. And so we want to make sure that Mike, for instance, Mike Brunige is the director of the denominational ministry plan. He coordinates that for us. And so this conference is very important to us as agencies in terms of the strategies that we want to look at as we move forward with our denominational plan. I'll just ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we will start on that side with Mariano. So.
My name is Mariano Avila. I'm professor at Calvin Theological Seminary and also pastoral advisor for the Board of World Relief Committee. My presentation, my report to you, with the permission of the members of the panel, is rather than repeating some of the things that we have been hearing that the other members will do, I ask permission to present to you the results of a survey that I did with about 100 key leaders throughout Latin America, asking them in terms of missionaries in Latin America. What were their idea in terms of receiving missionaries? I made 4 basic questions. The first one was, do you consider that the presence and ministry of North American missionaries is necessary in your country? Why? That was the first question. If your answer is yes, what kind of ministries or missionaries are needed? The third one was with regards to the personal qualifications that a missionary must have for a fruitful missionary work in their country. And the fourth one was, what is the best way in which our missionary agencies in North America can collaborate with Latin American churches? And I saw the relevance to repeat this that I presented to the board of World Missions of our church, because some of the things we have been listening here are very much what they say. So I'm sure that as you have heard some of the workshops and the plenaries, you'll hear those voices too. I got a very good response in this questionnaire that I sent. People from Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Argentina, and Brazil responded. All these are key leaders in their denominations, pastors. I got responses from some US and Canadian missionaries that were interested in giving feedback to this, seminary professors, presidents of seminaries, academic deans, CEOs of Christian relief and service agencies, and lay leaders. So it was a good representation of the leadership in Latin America. As a response to the presence and ministry, the need of the presence and ministry of North American missionaries in their countries, it was basically a split result. Half of them said, yes, we still need missionaries. Half of them, almost half, said, no, we don't need them. And at least a small part said, well, yes and no, and they offer some advice. Those who said yes, the reasons that they mentioned was the challenges of significant church growth in churches in Latin America and the large amount of work that they have to do, so help is always welcome. They mentioned also the mutual enrichment in partnering together in this work. Some mentioned the how-to mentality and ability to achieve goals proper of North American culture. So they said, yes, we need that. They'll be welcome. But it was a general idea. They said, please send your best missionaries and not just mediocre ones. And these are many, many voices. When asked to explain, they said, we want true missionaries with vocation to serve, not afraid of climate, smoke, or circumstances, food, all those things. There were other reasons for those who said no. These are at least some of the recurring responses of those who said, no, we don't need missionaries. They said, we don't need them because most missionaries come with a messianic complex. They make themselves, and these are different voices, they make themselves indispensable, make people depend on them. Some said we are sending already missionaries to the world. We have changed from being a mission field to become a missionary agency. And it's relevant in that is the presence of Latin American missionaries in the Arab world. That is quite significant. They said we have plenty human resources. Church growth in Latin America has been exponential. Others mentioned this, the largest and longest presence, the enormous economic investment, has drawn very poor fruits, and this was especially in Salvador. In Ecuador, that probably is one of the countries, a small country, and yet proportionally it has some of the largest missionary presence in the country. And they say they spend a lot of money, the results are very poor. Missionaries, this is another voice, damage personal and national identity by imposing their own. And these who said no, some of them qualified their answer and said, unless, and these are three main ideas, missionaries come in non-traditional roles. By traditional roles, they meant that they pay, they give orders, they are not responsible to the nationals, and they are the heroes of the movie. Another reason was that they don't believe, we hope that they don't believe that they are the only bearers of truth. And we'll have missionaries unless they are willing to have a mutual learning experience. That was another. Those who answered yes and went to the second question, in what kind of ministries are missionaries needed? And I list you here, I'll give you the list in order of importance. The highest interest for them was to have people who will be involved in theological education at a graduate level. Holistic ministries, serving the poor, we don't need bureaucrats. Specialized ministries like music, some mentioned church planting, in rural areas where nobody wants to go, not even the nationals, computing, administration and educational theological programs, short-term leadership intensive training, training those who will take their place when they are gone. And one even added this plea, please do not stay forever. And public relations. They wanted people to serve as bridges between their country and North American churches. The third question, what are the personal qualifications that a missionary must have for fruitful missionary work in your country? Humility was the highest. Almost every person who responded mentioned humility. Don't know why. Understanding and sensitivity towards culture. This was also in order of importance. Committed to our culture. People who love those they serve. With a learner attitude, with a service attitude, able to do teamwork, with a deep personal relation with God, with that incarnational style, contextualized, walk with people, you see some of these synonyms, never in positions of leadership. We want missionaries who live at the level of people they serve, who do not live in rich ghettos. Not an extreme Republican that believes that Bush is the Messiah. So those who are not extreme still have hope. Not short-term, first-class missionary tourism, willing to work and be a part of ministry. Not laboratory missionaries, those who live in an aseptic environment, isolated from all contaminations in the world. Not proponents of an American worldview. They must abandon the myth that the gospel and the American way of life are the same, and we want people expert in his or her field. And the last one, what is the best way in which our missionary agencies can collaborate with Latin American churches? And these were the responses. by request and under the authority and supervision of local churches or denominations, with partnerships and collaboration, not as bosses and directors, but as partners. Support the training of national leaders who will do a better job than missionaries. Listening, learning, and not imposing their own criteria, learning from local leaders, not duplicating what others do better, using resources for service and not for control, support the development and maturity of local churches, missionaries having a wide perspective of the world and church. We have a sad legacy of denominationalism and divisions. Help us to establish relations between North America and Latin American churches and partnerships in evangelistic and service projects. Help us to establish connections with educational, technical, and financial resources. So this is the summary. And I'm convinced that partnership, the kind of partnership that we hear described in different ways, is really the best way in our days to do missionary work. Missionaries must be trained taking into serious considerations the new realities of the two-third worlds in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, or as it is called today, the majority world. New values and attitudes must be cultivated, and I'm talking to myself and the institution in which I serve, that we prepare missionaries, but sometimes we are still operating in a very old mold of what missionary work must look there. So there's a lot to learn also in our institutions. A broader and cultural world perspective are indispensable for ministry, as well as a deep appreciation and respect for foreign cultures, integral, holistic ways of communicating the good news. We need to be humbly learning from faithful and successful nationals in the fields if we want to contribute to the evangelization of the world today. Our human, ecclesial, theological, and economic resources, if used wisely, may be multiplied and produce extraordinary fruits in the countries where we are present now. I hope that God will enlighten our imagination and help us to use our resources in ways in which will be much more fruitful for God's kingdom. Thank you.
My name is Michael Brunigee. My name is Michael Brunigee, and I'm the Director of Ministry Planning for Christian Reformed Church in North America. I attended all of the plenary addresses, and the workshops I attended were the Leadership Development Workshop, the Reconciliation Workshop, and the one this morning on partnership. I want to say how pleased I am to be here and honored to be here with you all. It's been a wonderful experience. We have a denominational ministries plan, the CRC in North America does. And a couple of years ago when we were, you might say, refreshing that plan, one of the objectives that we considered and then adopted was one with two simple words, but it may sound a little unusual: transcend boundaries. We said, we think God is calling us to transcend boundaries. We realize that might not be immediately understandable to people, so we might have to explain it. And we took a little time to think about it, and I would just want to quote from some things we said about what that meant. CRC Ministries will work with assemblies and congregations to help the Christian Reformed Church be a denomination that respects boundaries, yet is also able to transcend them. This includes assisting the CRC to collaborate both internally and externally so that it maximizes learning, and assisting the CRC to build and learn from its partners, networks, and coalitions while maintaining a good sense of itself. And then we said, well, how do we get specific about this? What are the things we can do? And one of the things that came up, one of the ideas, was to hold an assembly of worldwide partners of the Christian Reformed Church in North America. So you see, our being here is connected very clearly to what is in this ministry's plan. And it's one reason why I am enjoying this conference so much, because I think we really are trying very hard to listen and to learn. Now, what are the themes? We've been asked as panelists to say, what are the patterns and principles we're hearing about global mission? And let me start by saying, I think one of the things I'm hearing, or have been hearing, is that we need to live out our mission in community. Now, maybe that's obvious, but it is very important to note and to comment on that that's consistent across the board in what we are saying. And it's our God, the triune God. We remembered Trinity Sunday last Sunday, who lives in community as the pattern for us in our Christian living, that we live in community. This is something some are saying, and I think accurately, that needs to be especially heard by the very individualistic American culture. That's right. But it's something for all of us, whatever our settings as well. This came out with various phrases I noted down and want to just repeat to you. We need to learn together. Someone said, interestingly, you know, the tribalism we experience in some parts of the world is, interestingly, maybe similar to the racism you have in the United States. And maybe we can learn together about how to address these issues. Learning in community. The relationship, I heard it said, is the main thing about being in community. Yes, we can accomplish more things together, we can have a greater impact, but the relationship is the main thing. The relationship that brings us all together as brothers and sisters in Christ and gives glory to God. Because we are together, we are in community together. And biblically, the main thing is that we are in mission together as the people of God across cultures and across nationalities. So that's one theme that was very evident to me, that we live out our mission in community. And the other one struck me. It came up in all sorts of ways, and I would put it this way. The theme is transforming for transformation, right? But I think I heard very clearly that we need, all of us, to be transformed in order to be agents of God for transformation. And we were confronted, we were asked to think deeply about the fact that all around us and in ourselves we see tendencies to live counter to what God is calling us to do in the Scriptures and in our faith. We live with easy recognition of and accommodation to power, to comfort, to consuming, to wealth, to ambition, and to appearance, to recognition. We find it hard to embrace, as we must, suffering and risk. But that is the model that Jesus has given to us. And we need to put Christ first in all our circumstances. And so it came through, I felt quite clearly, that we need to be transformed, and it is a continual process. We know that. Of course we know that as Christians. But in our work, in our mission, this is an ongoing process. And it is countercultural then. We are called to be countercultural people wherever we are. Perhaps this message is clearly seen for those of us from North America. We have the power in the world. We are very enamored, I think, of position, money. We have a consumerist culture. But a number of brothers and sisters from other parts of the world I heard saying, you know, we confront this issue too within our societies, this accommodation to power and so forth. So it's something we all face. We all need to be countercultural. We all need to be shaped by the Spirit of God in living this way. A sub-theme of that I heard was, how do we pass on our faith and our passion to our young people in all of our cultures? Because we see them so easily kind of trapped and lured away by so much that is ephemeral or materialistic. Then let me just say also that this conference I felt was notable for not giving us easy or simple answers. It was notable for the questions that were asked, which indicates we all recognize we are on a journey together, a journey of learning in community. And we were asked by our plenary speakers a number of questions. I'd like to just read some of them that struck me as being particularly powerful. Maybe I resonated with them because of my own context, and that's all right. How can we open the door for unlikely contributions from unlikely places, Ruth Padilla de Borst asked. I want to live with that question. To what extent are doors open to majority world Christians on boards, in leadership positions, in strategic planning for mission activity in their own regions of the world? Good question. What steps must be taken so that third world, in quotes, theological and ethical articulations are explored with as much respect as those formulated in this country or inherited from Europe? Wow, echoes of that this morning in Brother Wagi's story of the neglected attention being given to Arabic Christians and their theological formulations. Other questions. How are our churches to include women's perspectives and visions in creating new paradigms of mission? How are our churches to understand and practice mission in a world of many faiths? How do we hold together dialogue and evangelism? Question from this morning, how is it possible to ignore that form of Christianity that does not mourn the loss of power influence because we never had any for over 1,000 years? How does a leader do the hard and sometimes lonely work of promoting change while maintaining the relationship with opponents of that change? That came out of the leadership workshop. How can the church, as church, whether it's local or denominational, play a leading role in reconciling activities? Why does it often have to be the lonely individual, many of them Christians, who stand up and take the lead? And we're so grateful for them, and we have heard examples of those, but why is the institutional church so slow sometimes? In North America here, we have had a relationship of the CRC with the Reformed Church in America, a painful split, and this year we are celebrating 150 years of the Christian Reformed Church, but its own origins are in a painful division, and we are working hard at how to reconcile, how to do ministry together with this sister denomination. But it's an ongoing question, and we need the church as the church to play a leading role in reconciling. So these themes of learning in community, of being transformed in order to be agents of transformation, and of there are no easy answers, but we need to live with important questions. And I take that last one away from me, with me very seriously, because we have processes, we have planning, we have meetings, we have discussion. And often those settings get overwhelmed by, consumed by the questions of the moment, the tasks of the day, the to-do lists, and so on. We need to give more time in those settings, and we are trying to, but we need to keep working at that. Time for a more leisurely reflection, time in prayer to consider the questions that are being asked of us. And we especially need to do that here in North America with those of you who are partners, so that it not happen just at this event, but it happen in an ongoing basis every year and as we go forward together. So I'll end there.
My name is Paul Mbunga Mpindi. I am originally from Congo and Congo-Kinshasa, and I work for the Back to God Hour. I am the French minister, so I preach to all the French-speaking countries in Africa and also in the Caribbean, especially in Haiti. And I live here in Grand Rapids with my family. We've been living here since 2001. We came back because of the war and stuff like that. So I like these kind of meetings because it's the only place that I find other people who speak English with an accent too. So it makes me feel comfortable. I'm not the only one who speaks a broken English. Good. What we are... Is it my broken English? Broken equipment.
Try that.
Okay. It is broken equipment, not broken English. What we are hearing, patterns and priorities for ministry. Actually, I don't want to go into things we all know. I just want to raise issues so that we can think hard. What are we hearing, or what am I hearing concerning patterns and priorities in ministry and partnership from Western and Third World churches or Christians? I divide my talk into two. From Western churches, what am I as Paul from Congo? What am I hearing right here? What is being said? I'm trying to process the whole thing. So allow me to be me and to share with you my thoughts. What I think I'm hearing is this kind of awareness of a paradigm shift from the West. What I'm hearing from Western churches and Christians is a paradigm shift from a know-it-all paternalistic approach to a more relational approach. It's like Western missionaries or churches do not want to be in control anymore, maybe because they have discovered that it doesn't work. This is what I find, that the Western church wants to listen, wants to talk. They want to work with us. What also I see is this willingness and readiness to listen to the real needs of, allow me the term, Africans or third world countries and Christians. There is, first of all, the shift in paradigm of mission work, willingness to listen and to understand the real needs. I can say a lot of things about it, but I'm always puzzled. You know, you go to a donor, he says to you, I want you to tell me exactly what I want to hear. Now, in Africa over there, we have a broken pump. I need $1,000 to fix it there. But the guy says, I like those who are involved in computers. I will give you my money only if you can buy a computer. I say, okay, I will buy a computer that will fix a broken pump. So it's funny. But I do get money, you know. Well. Okay. Willingness to play a proactive role in issues concerning justice and equality in the world, and especially in the third world. I see that Western Christians really want a change. They are tired of watching those horror stuff on TVs with African kids and women being killed. They want to do something. But just a thought, I say, but how are you going to do it? I don't see you don't have guns. So you can cry about it. I don't see how you're going to do it. Maybe you will write to your senator or president. But forgive me to say, I don't expect much from you, because you won't do it. When we go out there, we face people with guns, we know how it works. But we appreciate your concern. For me, it's a big change. It's something positive, and I like it to see you fighting for justice, and I love it. I also see you trying to work very hard to relieve poverty. I see all kinds of NGOs in Africa now doing something to help, and we appreciate that. I also maybe should help you a little bit see that it's like you are suffering from a collective guilt. You blame yourself for everything, and I wonder why. Always I see Westerners worried. They feel guilty for what is happening in Africa or in other places in the world. Let me tell you, you should feel 50% of the guilt. And we should feel 50% of the guilt too. You know, I don't think you should get the 100%, because we also suffer most of the time because we are irresponsible. You know, I don't want to blame you 100%, but we have to share a little bit of the guilt. And then finally, yeah, this is what I read from the West. Now, as an African or as a third world theologian or Christian, I'm a little bit worried about the sudden awareness, the sudden change in the Western approach. Forgive me, don't get mad at me. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. But when somebody has been doing things a certain way for 100 years and suddenly he becomes good, then you say, no, something is there. What is next? Why have they changed? You know? So at the same time, we rejoice, but we are suspicious. Why did you change? You know? That's a question. You might not ask it, but we ask it always. They never cared. Why have they become caring? Why do they care now? A questioning of the foundation of partnership with Western Christianity. Why do Christians from the West want to help us? Is it because we are poor, or is it because they want to share both Christ and their resources with us? These are questions. What will be the partnership with third world countries if we became financially independent? After more than 100 years of being recipients of Western missions, does third world Christianity have something to offer to Western Christianity? If yes, what is it? What are the needs of Western countries and Christians that we, as third world Christians, should meet? Why do you feel you have to give us something? Don't we have something to give you too? I think one of the negative aspect of being a recipient is you lose your responsibility of giving. You only know how to receive. And the verse that Jesus says, there is much joy in giving than in receiving, people like us, we don't know it because we always receive. And you have brought Jesus Christ to us. But sometimes we wonder, isn't it time for us to give you Jesus, not back, but in our way? You know? Because after 100 years, if we have not understood the gospel, then guys, you didn't do a good job. You know? Finally, this is a very important question for me. What if we remove money and if we remove things? What kind of partnership are we going to have with you if we remove money and things and power? Let's put it that way. How are we going to work together? Because so far, I have the feeling that we need you not because we want you. We need you for what you have in hands. You know? Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the foundation of missions. We need you not for what you are carrying. We need you because we didn't know Jesus. You brought him to us. That's why we embrace you so tight, because you have helped us meet him. We shouldn't obsess over you. We shouldn't focus on you as missionaries. No, you are a carrier. You have brought us Jesus. Now we focus on him, and you stand with us, and we look at him. You know? Now, I think you applauded to tell me enough is enough, so I'm done. I'm done too. Yeah.
Had to follow that. Yeah. The equipment does work. I'm Setri Nyomi. Most of my life, I lived in Ghana in West Africa. Now I currently serve as the General Secretary of the World Alliance of Reformed Churches, which is headquartered in Geneva. I've tried to focus what I'm going to say in the next few minutes on what we've been hearing, mainly in the presentations and questions in the plenaries, also from some of the summaries of the workshops, and some of the conversations in informal places as we look at this whole theme of what we are hearing as we develop patterns and principles for ministry. And that's how I've reshaped the theme that is there, because I don't think it's the panel that is talking about the patterns and priorities, but to simply reflect what we are hearing as all of us develop these patterns and priorities for ministry. And I've put a few points on at least some of the things that I've heard through all these processes. And the first is that stories of people's lives, stories of our lives and engagements demonstrate that in the 21st century, God continues to deliver his people in miraculous ways and continues to equip us and to engage us in his mission and to call us into partnership with one another. And those stories, whether they are stories of what we've heard from Cambodia, from Latin America, from Egypt, from the different places that we have been hearing, even informally, from one another, demonstrate the fact that God continues to deliver his people, not 1,800 years ago, not a century ago, but today. And at least what I've heard and learned from each of those demonstrate that it is in my interest, it is in our interest to hear those stories and be challenged by them and to be inspired by them. And that brings me to my second point, that listening to one another is very important in partnership in mission. That hearing others' experiences and stories and how they are engaged in mission in their contexts help challenge me, help challenge us to be more faithful in our witnessing to our Lord Jesus Christ. It affirms the fact that God has placed in us gifts, in both those who are on mission and those who, to whom mission arrives, or in the old words, those who are missionaries and those who are recipients of mission. God has placed in us gifts that we need from one another, and we do well to include that thought in our thinking about what we are called to do in mission partnerships today. We need to listen to one another. We need to learn from one another in mutuality. A third area is an emphasis in various presentations and various workshops of the fact that mission belongs to God. If all of us recognize that mission belongs to God, that we are called by our Lord Jesus Christ, then we will keep that at the focus of what we do in mission and how we engage with other people in mission. And it's not something we'll do just in our way. We have to do it the way the Lord of the mission calls us to. And again, one of the things that focuses it from both what we heard and from the different echoes to it from the very first evening's theme, let's keep Christ central. And that's very important for our engagement in mission. But keeping that focus also does mean that none of us can ever think we can do it alone. We need partners. When we go into a place, we need partners in wherever we go to. This morning, for example, we did hear that we will waste a lot of time if we, for example, go into a setting and think we're going to do there. Our brother Wagid was sharing with us that in the Middle East context, for example, there are people engaged in mission. And we do well to recognize that role in mission. And that's been echoed in many other places. That also calls for interdependence, in which there is a recognition of mutuality and equality, where it is not how much one partner in the partnership has, but recognizes that all of us do have gifts, whether those gifts are measured in financial resources or in other ways. We all have gifts that we bring to it, and the mission and the resources and gifts we bring to it all belong to God. And God is the one who has called us all to participate in that mission. A fourth thing that stands out, again, beginning from one presentation, but echoed over and over again at different places, is the fact that God uses unlikely persons, unlikely sources for his glory. And again, recognizing this becomes a very important piece in how we engage in mission and how we partner in mission today, that not recognizing that actually denies us the possibility of engaging faithfully in God's mission. And that question, which our sister Ruth kept pointing to yesterday, can anything good come out of, you name it? Yes, but not only Nazareth, I'm talking now about our different places. That question, if we can then now reflect back to how it was raised and affirm that indeed God can call from unlikely places and use unlikely sources for his own mission. That's one of the things that's, again, that we are hearing as we develop patterns and priorities for ministry. A fifth is God works in partnership, in community. And we are also called upon to work in partnership and in community, in partnership with local people wherever we engage in mission, in partnership with people who are not like us, but working in partnership and working in community, having community-based mission is very important. And that entails listening to the people in the community and having them help shape how we engage in mission and ministry. A sixth is mission, and our work in partnership calls us to also focus on issues of justice and advocacy. All of us, it used to be thought of as this is only a thing that the global South is putting on the agenda of the global North. But all of us live and witness in areas where issues of justice are part of what we are called to, whether it's on the basis of race, the economy, gender. We are all ministering in areas where there is an issue of justice or injustice around, and that needs to be very much a part of our focus when we are engaged in mission. And in fact, if we're going to engage in mission as partners of people, then their context, what they're going through, ought to be very much a part of our focus as we engage in mission together. And some of these, all of these are just some of the things that we are hearing, and hopefully they will inform us as we continue to develop patterns and priorities for our engagement in ministry. Thank you.
I sense a need for us to kind of move around a bit. If you don't mind, can we do something like an icebreaker exercise? Does that sound okay to all of you? Why don't you just stand up?
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. I don't know if there are some people that would like to show us some different types of dances from different parts of the world. Do any of you know some dances that help you to move around? I know one from North America that my kids are really getting into. It's called the hip hop. And they tell me that it's a great way to do exercise as well. And it goes something like this. Okay. So wave your hands. You lift up one knee and you meet your two hands as the knee goes up. Okay? All right. Okay. I also have another one. that I was taught in Kenya, but I'm not very good at it because I'm not as tall as people like Doug Seebeck and Reverend Peter Simon Emyao. But it's the Maasai dance. And you basically have to jump as high as you can. You sort of go 2 little jumps, and then you do a big jump. And you try to go as high as you can. So let's see who can be the highest jumper. Okay, the last one for the ladies. In Africa, as many of you know, children are very good at learning dances, and the way that they dance is to wiggle their hips. And the more you can do it, the better. Now, I'm told that I don't have much to do because I don't really have hips, but for some of you who have them, this is the time that you can show them. So, wave those hips. Move across. There you go. All right, you can sit down. Thank you. Oh, Andy told me I should introduce myself. For those of you who don't know, my names are Ida Castra Mutoigo. I work as the director for CRWRC in Canada, and I'm not sure why they picked me as the director. But I sometimes think I'm a little mixed up. And as some of you may know my history, I have lived and worked in Africa for several years, probably about 15 years or so, and I married somebody from there. So my thinking, my way of looking at the world is completely different than it ever was when I grew up as a young girl in a dairy farm, on a dairy farm in Canada. But one of the things that struck me as I was thinking about this conference was sort of the whole theme of complexity. That when we're doing missions, it's a really complex thing. It's getting more complex, it seems, as time goes on. And we've had some really good, I would say, provocative questions that have started to highlight what some of those complexities are. And I don't know if some of you know me too well, but one of the things that I start doing when things get complex is I try really hard to make sense out of it, somehow. I believe God's a God of order, and yet He's also a God of diversity. So, you know, we have the juxtaposition of trying to make things simple and manageable, and yet to appreciate the many, many ways that we can live out our ministry and our missions. So as I was struggling with how to put this together, one of the things came to my mind about how about looking at some of the key factors that are affecting this complexity. And I'll just draw these out for you as I share this. And maybe some of you in the back may not necessarily see, but I'll try my best to illustrate this. I'll start first with just looking at several circles. And when we look at these different circles, the circle in the center is actually ourselves. We as a mission worker, as a leader, and when we are Christians, we accept Christ, who instills His Spirit in us. And He gives us, most of us who are in leadership anyways, a sense of vision, some kind of a calling, some kind of a direction of where we want to go. That's the mission. And therein lies the energy that we have for what we are doing. But we find ourselves as an individual not in an isolated way. We have to work in some kind of an organization. And it can be a church, it can be a Christian development organization, it can be just a body of believers that we find ourselves in. And we often try to minister outside of ourselves into a community, but that community is not just immediately around us, it's also affected by a larger global environment. And one of the things that has struck me as we've gone through these past few days is that there are key challenges and complexities in each of these different layers and levels. And our brothers here have really highlighted what some of them are. I know yesterday's talk really highlighted a lot of the global ones for me. There's so many that you could name. Even globalization itself is one of them. The pluralism comes out. We have consumerism that was talked about. We've got all kinds of cultures that are coming into each other. You know, the cultures of North America coming into Africa, and people wondering, what do I do? I have staff who would ask the question, you know, why is it that I don't even think about visiting my sick sister who is in the hospital anymore? How did we come to this point that we have changed? And then recognizing it's the consumerism that has been adopted by other countries that has come in. Even the complexity of leadership styles, as you look at politics, you know, who says democracy in North America should be applied wholesale into another country? Why are we, and what is the appropriate structures, political systems, if that might not be appropriate? Disasters, global warming, all these are pieces that we are facing in the larger environment, but they're infiltrating everything we do as individuals or as a community. Injustice, insecurity, many of you talked about that as well. Even the idea of the ideologies that are out there about who God is and what is important. Exclusivity compared to being inclusive. What should we be, you know? Do we become inclusive because we are a tight Christian community, or a community that's global, or should we be just to ourselves? What is it that we want to be in a global world? And then when we look at the whole idea of the church or organization and how it interacts with community, there's all kinds of complexities that I saw here and heard people talk about. Prosperity gospel came out in some of our discussions with people. People viewing God as a disposable God, and that relationships are also disposable. And even as you look at technology, I really appreciated the leadership seminar that we had. It really highlighted that we've lost our connectedness with people. The face-to-face meetings aren't there anymore. And that just gives this impression that also people are very disposable. There's the whole need for evangelism versus the need for dialogue. How do we balance those kinds of things together? That was highlighted last night. Power and discrimination based on age, gender, and race as we interact with those communities, as we partner with one another. There's internal division and conflict sometimes versus peace. And even this ability to network is very, very critical. But one thing that I was struck by, for me probably the thing that I go away with the most from these past few days is this piece right here. Because as much as I may want to change the world, if I'm not changed or transformed, forget it. Gandhi at one point said, "Be the change you wish to see in this world." And I have learned in all my leadership years that if truth be known, the hardest thing to manage is not the organization, it's not the people around me, it's myself. I'm the most difficult thing there is. And how do I accept God's grace and transformation in my life? And the testimonies that came out this week really spoke powerfully to me related to that, especially as I reflect about Barnabas's talk and some of the struggles that he went through. And then it begged the question of, how do I become changed? How much am I Christ-centered? How much is prayer really a part of my life? And I like to look at this piece here that Reverend Simon Peter emphasized during our board meeting, is the whole values. How are values shaping me? How are they shaping me? Am I really Christ-centered? And the whole piece of prayer being so important for us. It was very interesting during our presentation this morning how this came out. Because before we made our presentation or had the two speakers, Nancy and Barnabas, share about working in an area where there's no church, and we basically said, well, it's not necessarily no church, but in an area where there are non-Christians or people of a different worldview. As we were praying for this session, one of the prayers that was laid upon our hearts was to pray for the people that would be there with us, and that God would somehow minister to those that were amongst us based on the burdens that they had also on their hearts. And we shared about the complexities of ministering in a Muslim world, in a Hindu world, and so on. And then just before, as we were reaching towards the end, one of our brothers from Indonesia stood up and he says, I have to say something. I just have to say something. And he spent the next 10 minutes just sharing the burden on his heart, the challenges that he's facing from a very oppressive environment that is putting all kinds of rules on the church, that's burning churches around them, that is really limiting their ability to live gospel truth in a powerful way. And so we spent time just doing this, is the whole prayer piece. And it struck me afterwards, you know what? That's where we got to go back to each and every time. How are we grounded in our relationship with Jesus Christ? If we look at who we are as mission workers, are we asking for God's help? Truly asking for His help? Are we being guided by His wisdom so that we are able to discern the spirits of this age? Because there are just so many spirits out there that are giving us all these different messages of complexity and, in a sense, getting us mixed up. And so that, for me, was kind of the theme, that at the end of the day, the thing that I've got to go back home to is just examining myself. And how do I now respond to all of these opportunities that are there and all these different challenges that are there? How do I look at issues of confidence in other people? Do I empower others to be confident, or do I take the confidence away from them as I do my mission work? Do I enable them to be responsible, like my brother said? And I've started to discover over time that actually development is really about the ability for others to be responsible and to make good choices about their lives and to face their relationship with Christ and to develop that. So that's just a few thoughts that I had to share, and I just want to thank all the people who were a part of that process and journey for me, and I just hope that anybody who was a part of this week will also go home with those kinds of thoughts and reflections. Thank you.
Wow, what great summaries and additional challenges. One of the things that we did was, with apology for you as regional groups, were supposed to meet in the upper crust. The people in the Commons didn't realize that the multi-ethnic group was not you. And so they let them in to the area that was supposed to be reserved for us. So it got a little complicated at lunchtime to pull your groups together. But what we had asked you to do was, in regional groups of partners, to just explore what you had been hearing and then listen now and say, is there anything in addition that from a regional perspective you would like to bring to this group? And so we're going to start with the youth group. Come up here, Dan, thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Eisinga. I'm a Calvin student. There are a few of us here enjoying this very much. And I want to begin just to say, first of all, that I'm positive that I will not be able to do justice to the conversations that I had with my friends at lunch, but I'm going to try my best, and I hope that it is beneficial to all of you as well. First of all, we want to thank you all very much for including us at this conference. We're obviously a minority here, and we want you to know that it's really beneficial for us. There are a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of reasons why we feel so thankful. And some of that is that, one, there's a ton of youth out there that are very, very interested in these kind of issues. There's a growing major on Calvin's campus, the development major, which most of us are part of. And that major has gotten larger and larger and larger, and more people are asking us every day about it and what we're learning. And even in the 3 short years that I've been at Calvin, I've experienced a huge amount of growth and interest of the issues that I've been studying. And so to meet people who are involved in those things in real life, everyday sorts of activities is invaluable. So thank you for that. So a lot of the things that we talked about have already been talked about by our panelists about common themes. But one thing that we wanted to bring to attention that we have noticed because we're here is the great potential there is for the church to be a unifying and global presence for these kinds of issues. We're all representatives of the same body of Christ, whether we call that body by God or Allah or Jesus Christ. We're all members of that. And I think everyone here knows that, but we feel very strongly that unification and that strength that can be derived there is something so important. And there can be so many things achieved there in that give and take that we've talked about. So that was one thing that we talked a little bit about. Another thing, which all of you will probably not have talked about, was that for us at Calvin, development and mission and missions have always been very, very separate. Missions is kind of almost a bad word in a sense. It's seen as imperialism and Messiah mentality. That's how most people, I think, view missions for our generation. And that's certainly the way that I had viewed that before coming here. I assumed that this was going to be a development conference, and it wasn't going to be about missions. And coming here and seeing all of you and listening to all of you and your struggles has helped us realize that those two things do not have to be separate, and in fact, they blend very well together. And that's, I think, extremely important as well. The blending of development and mission is huge. And I would recommend that anytime you have a chance to talk to any member of the younger generation, to make sure that they understand that. Because evangelism and empowerment can be one and the same. And I don't know that I knew that necessarily before attending this conference. A couple other things that we talked about was there's a call to action that is here. Today this is an example I can use from my personal experience. Today I took part in the economic development workshop, and Roland Hochsbergen described economic development as being like the weather, and that we all complain about it and we don't really like it and we all lament about it, but we don't ever really do anything about it because we can't. Only for development, we certainly can do something about it. And that really has to take place, I think. And I think that that's part of the reason that the younger generation is so interested in these issues, is because they really feel that call for action. We have to act. And we are willing and able, and given that we are willing and able, that would imply that we need someone to help give us a chance to act. So, for all of you, yeah, the reference there was supposed to be towards jobs or internships, after college experience. We're all very ready for that, let me tell you. So if you know of any positions, anyone to talk to, phone numbers, emails, that would be more than invaluable. The other thing that has really put me at ease at this conference is that despite the complexity that really can be overwhelming and at times just make you feel like you're so small and that you can't do anything, there is a huge amount of hope present here. And I've gotten that from every plenary, from every workshop, from everyone that I've talked to personally, is that despite that concrete feeling that you have when you talk about these issues and these questions and how stuck you just feel, it's possible. And all of us felt that, very much so. And I just wanted to let you all know that we may be young and naive, but your experiences and thoughts and comments about those struggles and what might be done and those questions that have been brought up, they haven't stopped us. And we're still very hopeful, and a lot of that has to do with what we've seen with everyone and what they're doing here. So again, thank you so much. Do you guys want to stand up so in case they do have any jobs or interviews? Huh? Come on. Thank you.
Great. Let's go with the Asia group. Why don't you stand up first so we know where you are at? And those of you from Asia. And Dino from Epicor, India, is going to represent Asia. Welcome.
We had two tables, Japan and Cambodia in one, Philippines, India, and Indonesia in one. Not that we wanted to be divided, but the lunchtime happened in such a way to divide into two groups. Not really uniquely different from what has been already spoken by the plenary members here this afternoon. But as people, delegates, partners from Asia, we really appreciate the fact that the learning is not only from north to south, but also south to south. This morning presentation about the Arabic Christian world, which is a part of the southern world, is something that also can be learned from south to south. And we really appreciate that, the knowledge and also the opportunity for us to listen to one another. And that this learning circle can always be between north to south, south to north, but also south to south and north to north as well. I think Northern Americans need also to exchange with the European world to be able to learn from one another. As a whole, we thought that the intention and the willingness, the desire to listen from different cultures, or what Ruth calls it that the unlikely places, is really appreciated. The plenary speakers and also the workshop that has been conducted have been from different voices, and I think that is really wonderful. And of course, the challenge is, as was already discussed, how do we take this further from the individual to the organization, the church, and to the global level. We appreciate the fact that there is much openness to appreciate different cultures, different languages, But I think people from Asia, when we were talking about the dance, we thought we'll have some Asian dance, but Asian dance are much more musical and slow, so you'll not wake us up from that, you know. But we also thought that there is perhaps the need to explore songs and dramas and dances. That's a part of our culture. So that as we talk about culture and language, there have to be ways of communicating through music, and that we thought is very important. And yes, in the partnership, we looked at equality in partnership, looking at partnership, and the emphasis not on money, not only on projects, but human relationship. I think in the workshop in the morning on effective partnership, the emphasis was made for those of us who attended that it is important to really emphasize on human relationship as the central point of partnership and not just on project or finance. There was also, I think it's to do with those from, especially from Indonesia or others who have a stronger relationship with CRC or the Mission Agency or the CWRC, that if there we talk about the need for looking at Christian education in mission, but there seems to be, in terms of the approaches, that is the least that is being emphasized now. CRC need to relook that again. I was not a part of the workshop, but those who attended the workshop mentioned about the importance of the Christianness of Christian schools and also running the good school. Is that the future projection for CRCNA and its related agencies? Yeah, I think that's all. And as I said, also the Asian group that consists of 5 countries. Of course, we have more than 2.5 billion population of the world. Not really. The 5 countries, we also realize that the differences are not only from north to south, but even south to south is different. We were looking at how do we react to situations and questions amongst ourselves as a part of the exercise. And as Filipinos would like to immediately respond. Celebration is a part of Filipino life. We like to, whereas in Japan and some parts of India, we like to slowly treat those matters, don't react immediately. And we realize that we need to appreciate those differences as we looked at. And with the ending, I want to say that this transformation, the theme of transformation has to be happening in individual life, but this cannot happen alone, but it needs to happen in communities of faith, but also in the communities that we live. Thank you.
Dino has written a lot on transformation, so he knows what he's talking about. Thank you very much. On the question of Christian education, Dino, you were encouraging that move into having more of an educational investment in the mission process. Okay, thank you. Let's go to Europe. Have Europe stand up.
It has been a wonderful blessing for us to be here with you and to have you be with us. I've been reminded for a long time of the verses that are posted up there. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the hardest thing that we have experienced in Eastern Europe is the change of mentality, of worldview that needs to take place. And in our sharing at the table, we had from Romania and Russia, but also representing from Hungary and Hungarian perspective, ethnic perspective, and also representing world missions working in Ukraine. And one of the common thread lines that was expressed is the need to overcome the mindset that has been so deeply rooted in our lives, in our hearts, that of communism or former communism. And how do you do that? And so one of the common threads that needs or encouragements that we have is sharing and exchanges of learning how, in particular countries in Eastern Europe particularly, this is happening, and learning from each other and supporting and encouraging each other in making the step towards transformation. The question was raised, transformation. All the former communist countries are afraid of transformation. There is power, and they don't want to lose the power. So the question is, how can you do transformation in a way that is accepted, that induces the deep root changes that need to take place? Another strategy, I could call it, is an increased or need for increased collaboration and networking through meaningful and collaborative partnerships and networking. We've all heard about this, and I don't want to repeat what has been said, but that's why we've used the word meaningful collaborations and partnerships. What does it make sense to do together? And there are various bodies, international alliances, interested in various things. There are local churches, there are local people, simple people whose hands are bruised by the sharing of the gospel in villages. And how can we bring almost two very different worlds together? And it's a challenge that needs to continue. We need to continue to respond to. Church in community. That's probably the key for us in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is a Christian half of the continent. Eastern Bloc countries have regained their freedom and they can express their Christianity. European Union is trying to create a new constitution, and the fight has been whether there is any place for God in the history of Europe. And it's troubling as how people forget their past, good or bad, but they put it aside and try not to learn from the past. And but the practicality or the reality of things is that, for example, Romania is 87% Orthodox Christian. Russia is probably just as much or more. Poland is majority Catholic. Hungary is Catholic and Reformed. Religion, just as in Middle East, you cannot separate religion from the state. Throughout the history of Europe, they've been together. And so the question is, how can we make Christianity relevant in the communities? And culturally, contextually, and relationally, how are we relevant in our communities? The discipleship, the evangelism that we make, the ministry that we make, is that holistic? Is that, do people feel in their stomach? Do they feel your Christianity in their hospitals, in the prison, on the streets? And there's another dimension of the church ministry. There are huge areas in Europe, especially in Russia, where there are no local physical churches. And yet there is a chance to minister to those people. And that is done through the media, through radio, and more recently through internet access to the media. And so our challenge is to CRCNA, to CRWRC, to World Missions, to Back to God Hour, to Calvin Seminary and College, and many other agencies and bodies represented here, how can we work in a meaningful and collaborative way in advancing God's kingdom in Eastern Europe, in Europe in general, but in Eastern Europe specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabi. Gabi is team leader for CRWRC in Romania. And let's go with Latin America. And first of all, you have to stand up. Latin America people. And so now, those of you who have English only as your language or don't understand Spanish are going to understand what it's like to be on the other side of the translation parts.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Lo que van a escuchar ahora es un resumen de los pensamientos y sentimientos de los representantes de América Latina acerca de lo que esta conferencia ha significado para nuestra región.
What you're going to hear now are some of the feelings and thoughts of how this, of the brothers and sisters from Latin America and how we've received this conference.
En primer lugar, sentimos que hemos estado muy aislados y muy desconectados de las realidades de otros continentes.
In the first place, we feel that we have been very isolated and distant from the reality of other continents.
Y la ignorancia de estas realidades nos impide sentir lo que ellos sienten.
And our lack of awareness about these other places has hindered our understanding of how they feel and what they feel.
Esta conferencia nos invita a tomar más en cuenta a otras culturas y promover más la participación.
This conference encourages us to take other cultures more into account and to be more willing to include and participate together.
También sentimos que Dios nos está llamando al compañerismo y a la colaboración.
We also feel that God is calling us to working together, to partnership and collaboration.
Pero no solamente pensando en términos financieros,
But not only in financial terms,
sino aportando todo lo que tenemos como los dones, las ideas
but contributing all that we have, our gifts, our ideas,
y las mejores formas de hacer las cosas a partir de nuestra propia experiencia.
and our best practices based on our own experience.
También tenemos la percepción de que las iglesias norteamericanas tienen la tendencia de decidir cómo hacer las cosas.
We also have the perception that North American churches have their way of thinking about how things should be done,
sin tomar en cuenta las decisiones de las iglesias latinoamericanas.
and don't always take into account the actual decisions of the Latin American churches.
Esta conferencia nos ha ayudado a descubrir el valor del compañerismo
This conference has helped us discover the value of partnership
y también a descubrir que cuando estamos dispuestos a colaborar podemos lograr muchas cosas juntos.
and also to discover that when we are willing to collaborate, we can do many big things together.
Pero el respeto mutuo y el aprendizaje mutuo es indispensable para crecer en este tipo de relación.
But mutual respect is essential for this partnership.
También algunos mencionaron de que hay una percepción de que las iglesias cristianas de Norteamérica no han apoyado lo suficiente para lograr la autosostenibilidad de las iglesias en Latinoamérica.
There also has been a perception that North American churches have not supported enough the development of self-sufficiency on the part of Latin American churches.
Pero también había la percepción de que muchos de nosotros en Latinoamérica vivimos bajo el paradigma de que todo lo que es valioso aprender solo viene del norte.
But we also recognize there also was a perception among us that for many of us within Latin America, there is this presumption that everything good comes from North America.
Entonces también recibimos la invitación de que tenemos que hacer una toma de conciencia primero nosotros, los latinoamericanos.
So we also were challenged in our group that a first step is that as Latin Americans, we need to come to awareness
acerca de lo que podemos aportar al resto del mundo.
of all that we do have to contribute to the rest of the world.
Otra vez en términos de ideas, de experiencia, de dones de lo que Dios nos ha dado.
In terms of gifts, experience, and ideas that God has given us.
Pero también necesitamos hacer también una toma de conciencia hacia nuestros hermanos del norte.
We also are called to take a new awareness in relation to our brothers and sisters in the north,
para que conozcan lo que nosotros podemos aportar.
so that you too may know what we have to contribute.
Y finalmente queremos felicitar a los hermanos que hicieron posible nuestra participación en este diálogo.
We also want to congratulate our brothers and sisters that made this dialogue and our part in it possible.
Porque algunos hermanos comentaban que era la primera vez y la primera oportunidad que ellos tenían para estar en un diálogo de esta naturaleza.
Because for some of us, this was a first opportunity to engage in an encounter of this type.
Este es el primer paso, dijeron.
This, they said, is a first step.
Pero la pregunta es, ¿qué vamos a hacer ahora?
But the question is, now what?
¿Qué más podemos aportar?
What more can we contribute?
¿Cuál es nuestro siguiente paso?
What is our next step?
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Luz and Ruth. Let's go with West Africa next. And we have to have them stand, of course. West Africa. Gender balanced.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Pierre.
And I'm Mary Crickmore.
I'm the Director for Christian Health Association of Sierra Leone, West Africa.
And I'm team leader for CRWRC West Africa.
The team believes that the Spirit of the Lord is here. It's in the atmosphere, it's in the words that have been expressed these few days. And the team also believes that we have a common heritage. We are all from one source, and we are all diverse. And we strongly believe in what this conference has been talking about, partnership, partnership, partnership. And we also believe that words are just words. You must put it in action. And therefore, we want to demonstrate our partnership today in our presentation. Because we also believe that as partners, you have to be real honest with each other. You have to know the limitations of each partner, and you have to value the assets and the liabilities of each partner. In the African context, we said you should never be ashamed of the bucket or the bathtub that you take your bath in every day. That's partnership, you know. So on that note, I will ask Mary to share our reflections and our thoughts.
Yes, the bathtub or the bucket is like this conference. We found a lot of dirt on ourselves, or we found some things that should be changed. And we shouldn't be upset if we're finding some things to clean up. We should be happy. We should be happy if we're finding some things, if we've identified some things that we should improve. Let me just briefly list some of the things that West Africa noted. We need to define partnership. We agree with the other teams. It's not just money transfer. Each one brings something to the table, but let's be clear what we're bringing. It's joining with someone who has what you need. That could be information, that could be skills, materials, or money. And as Latin America said, we need mutual respect for our strengths and our shortcomings. We still believe there's need for Western world to Africa partnerships, with the recognition that the nationals want to derive their own programs and have missionaries join with them in implementation, plus help them link to North America. In addition, we want intra-African partnerships like Sierra Leone to Liberia, Liberia to Ghana. We have some good models, and that leads us to network. Network is a key idea for us. We need to do this more. Eastern Europe also noted the importance of network. Nobody has it all. Maybe we want to do a website in West Africa. We want to explore ways to have convergence. An example, there's a company destroying the rainforest and destroying people's livelihoods in Liberia. The local people can't address that themselves. But if they get linked into an international environmental lobbying group, it can be stopped. So that's what networking can happen, can accomplish when it happens at different levels. There is a cost to partnership. There can be arrows coming at you, criticisms from your own people that you're not being loyal to them, criticisms from the people of the northern partner. This happened in Liberia, that the people at the focus point of the partnership were getting criticism from both sides. You have to be patient. We need a Christian voice at all levels, and the church in West Africa needs to unite to urge for justice and speak out against injustice. We have a lot of bad governance. Sometimes, maybe watch our terminology. People might get upset if we use the term corruption, but we can talk about justice and fighting injustice. Nobody's going to be against that. How do we help people to change? This is a challenge. In Sierra Leone, there's been no water, no electrical service, no health care for so long, people just accept it. That's the way it is. We've got to look for change. Transformation means change in knowledge, change in attitudes, change in behavior. All three levels. We talked about we need to work on human capital in West Africa. We need more regional university level education that's culturally sensitive and world-class and Christian. We need more leadership development. We need succession planning for when the good leaders, when they pass on to be with the Lord, what's going to happen to the people left after them? Is it going to fall apart, the work that they've been doing? We need to strengthen existing institutions, not just create new institutions. We need to cultivate Africans who have resources that they could donate to the work in their own home continent. And we need to equip the African youth. We affirm in this conference the resources, the human resources of the South have had a major role in this conference. And the West Africa participants were really happy about that. Finally, we want to talk about telling the truth. In partnership, let us be very honest with one another. And let's react as spiritual people when we are corrected. If our partner is honest with us, let's not be defensive. Let's not let Satan make us angry and break the relationship. Let's react as Christians with learning and forgiveness. That's what don't be ashamed of the bucket or the bathtub that you're taking a bath in. You want to get clean. Let's get clean.
Thank you, Mary, for demonstrating partnership, Samuel and Mary. And North America. I don't know how to ask the North America part to stand up. North America partners. Those that were at the table that were discussing this issue. There we go. Rick, come on up.
My name's Rick Droge, and I'm a member of the North America Ministry Team for CRWRC. I live in the northwest corner of Iowa, right next to Dordt College. There's a few of us here. Come on, there's a few. First of all, on behalf of our group that met, we would just like to say thank you to those who put this together. Thank you to all of those who were involved in it. And thank you to the panelists and those who shared before us. You touched on a lot of the things that we talked about at our table, and we appreciate that. That being said, as you know, those of us from North America, the U.S., and our friends from Canada that did meet, we do have some opinions. And we knew you'd be disappointed if we didn't. So we'll share those with you. We obviously focused our discussion around the main themes, the main thoughts, the questions, and overwhelmingly when we asked that question, it came through was, do it with us. It was about collaboration, about partnerships, but about equal partnerships. And so we spent some time taking a look at that and discussing that. And one of the other things that we continue to hear was learning from each other about listening. That kind of came through loud and clear. One of the things we discussed is that ministry happens in a place, happens in places. And so that being said, we sort of asked the question, in our context of North American and us sitting at the table, which there was home missions people there, CRWRC people there, world missions people there, we began to discuss, what do we need to do? How can we collaborate, even in our own areas, in our own context here in North America? We began just talking about working together at all levels, and we began discussing what voices are there at our level and who should be at the table, and maybe who are we excluding or not listening to at our table. And we began to thinking about how do we keep the diaconal community development piece in this process? What does that look like? And so we began discussing some things. How do we translate what we have heard and learned here to my own church, to my own community, to my own neighborhood? What does that look like? What have I learned? One of the suggestions, or maybe one of the thoughts that came up, is the need to redefine our definition of stewardship. And I think Mary and a few others have kind of touched on this. We took it and said, here in North America, and for most of us, when we talk about stewardship, is I reach in my back pocket and I give you something. This is a one-way thing, right? For most of us in our church, it's a one-way transfer of goods. And to be quite honest, that's the way most of us, we feel, or at least in the context that we're working with within our churches, that is. So we talked about how do we change that, and we talked about harvesting the goods and harnessing the goods and gifts in our own communities, and the need that we have to do this. And if we do this process, and trying to think about how to do that, but if we do that, we can move from doing ministry to and in to ministry with, as we begin to look at that. And so we spent some time kind of thinking and dialoguing around that. Another suggestion that was given to us, or at the table that was discussed, and I heard it touched on here too, was maybe a clear definition of the terms. We talk about partnership, we talk about collaboration, we talk about relationship, and we could put together a list of those. Here in North America, that means something different than it means for those in the Congo or in East Africa, West Africa. We're hearing that today. And so we're talking sometimes past each other and about different things. And so we thought that maybe that would be helpful. We overwhelmingly heard a request for us to ask for those to come and minister with us, right? For a joint thing, not just a one direction. And we touched on that a little bit. We also talked about a need for us here in North America to come to some type of an agreement on how we can do that, to think maybe outside the box on what ways that these folks here who have offered so many great ideas and suggestions and have so much experience can help us in our churches And what would that look like? And what might be some ways to do that? One of the other things that we came up with, maybe just a suggestion, we noticed that the workshops really focused on a lot of content, and there was a lot of information in the workshops. One of the suggestions we had was, obviously the content was important and so forth, but maybe if we could have had spent some time maybe reading that ahead of time and spent some more time in process of learning from each other in the workshops, and quite honestly listening to each other, east to west, north to south, south to north, west to east, and doing a little bit more sharing, at least for us from North America, we would have felt that would have been a helpful suggestion, is to think a little bit about that process. That being said, we began to ask the question, and I heard a couple of the panelists and some of those who came up before me say, okay, so now what? What's next? What can we do? How can we allow these voices to be heard, and what are some of the things that, that we can do, and what are some of the next steps that we can take? And one of the people in our group challenged us and said this: what makes us, those of us here in North America, in our context, think that we have all the answers when you or I aren't doing some of this very things in our own communities, in our own backyards, and in our own churches? And so we were challenged by that to begin to think about, again, how do we do this in our church? How do we do this in our community? And how do we do this in our neighborhood? I guess if our overall thinking here today is transforming for the transformation, we need to take the next steps. We need to listen, we need to learn, and quite honestly, we need to go do it. We need to do some action. But we need to do all of this in loving, caring relationships. And we just again want to thank all of you for the opportunity that we've had to sit, to listen, to dialogue, and to learn from each other. I personally want to thank those that have been here. And I don't think Mike's here, but the worship times that we can spend worshiping with each other, I really enjoyed that. So with that, thank you.
Rick, do you know how hard it is in order to get people to meet a deadline of when they have to send their materials in? The other thing is that, you know, you send it out ahead of time and most people read it on the plane when they're coming in, right? But I think the intent is to create more and more of that dialogue. I think one of the things that we're learning as we do this is the use of the internet for this, and the intent was to get this information on the internet. It will be on the internet, so I appreciate that. East and South Africa, can you stand up? Thank you. And do we have a representative? I bet you can jump the highest, Simon Peter.
I tried and I couldn't make it. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Simon Peter Emiao, and I come from Uganda. And I'm a partner with CRWRC, and I think I want to represent collectively the views from our part of the continent. Friends from West Africa have done a very able job to kind of go ahead of us and grab the ideas that we put together. Nevertheless, I have to put in a few things and a few emphases here. Our personal view is that I think this week God has engaged us in discussing with him issues that concern his people. And I think that's been very, very able. And as I was sitting down and listening to our people and our team, we saw that this week God has been talking to us. Lots are yet left inside us that may never be written on these papers, but they're written in your heart. Some of them may not be revealed today. Some of them will be revealed tomorrow when you get back to your own place. But a few that he has made all of us commonly see for now, and they are meant for common purposes. Because when God reveals himself, certain things he keeps between you and him. And then certain things he keeps between you and us, or and others. And this week he's done that. And I do believe that, we do believe that that's very common. But I think one of the things that has come in God's heart very, very clearly, and I think we did hear God, and most of us have heard him, is about his core pearl. His core pearl is his people. And he feels that there's great value. And if he has spoken to us this week, he has said, my people bear my image. Whatever condition, whatever situation they are found in, they bear the image of God. These are the core, God's core pearl. It's entirely his own business. And as you know, that creation simply means support to mankind. So God has spoken to us in that way. It's not a divide of the north and south. It's about his people. Well, geographically, we find ourselves in the north, we find ourselves in the south. But when God looks on earth, he looks at it as no south, no north, no west, no east. He just sees his creation. That's how God looks at it. The second thing that we hear God speak to us collectively here has been a call for intensity in terms of our dialogue, building of relationships through dialogue, which is an open access to improvement, in service improvement of the activities and the projects and the things that we do, and as we work together with people. So God is calling us for an intensive way of improving and building upon relationships for good. And he uses dialogue as a means of doing that. And throughout this week, we've been dialoguing and exchanging ideas, the views, the way we see, using our different lenses from up and from down. And that has been very useful for this. And I think God would want us to continue doing this dialogue and keeping things up, and because the only way that we'll be able to build relationships. Thirdly, I think in this issue of our partnership, the core thing that God is calling us into is relationship with Christ. And if things are stemming from Christ towards us, our partnership is enabled. It bears fruit. It achieves what God wanted it to achieve before. And we should put relationships above resources, so that any resources that come into this come because we have a relationship. And I think even from a workshop this morning that was clearly spelled out in the project that is coming out in, what's this place again? Haiti. And it was very clearly that lots of, millions of dollars that are going to go into this. Bottom under it is relationship. There's not much that is coming from the top, but this is the basis. And I think once we put relationship above resources, it's going to make. And this relationship comes because of Christ. It doesn't come because of any other thing. Another thing that we had has been the collective formulation of our partnerships in terms of shaping our partnerships when it comes into goals, when it comes to objectives, when it comes to the formulation of activities on the ground. There is need for collective formulation and shaping, so that it's not just from the partner and then from possibly the other partner, but together the partners sit down, formulate, build those goals together. You find that when the ownership of such goals and such activities will be carried with equal strength, and it brings to a satisfaction what it is called for. And finally, I think what we had is a call for the evangelical body to support justice. And as we heard from Honduras the other night, yesterday, that if one voice is talking for justice and everybody is just sitting, as pastors and as leaders of possibly the church, our communities, we lack support when it comes to advocacy for justice. And when a single person goes out and risks his own name against the multitude, he gets crushed. But if in our partnerships we'll be able to encourage the communities, to encourage the evangelical body to stand together for justice, this is going to make a big difference. Just before I quit this place, one thing more is the challenging the theological assumptions. There are a number of things that are left going, like we talked about the ethnicity. There's nobody building up a theology around that, but there are a number of things that are also coming up which need a challenge. We don't have to take things for granted without challenging those things. And that's where you have to put the head and the heart together. In other words, the head gets to challenge what the heart believes so that there's logic and passion in carrying out things, and it brings it into sensitivity. Thank you very much from the East and Southern Africa.
Thank you very much. Our intent here was to have dialogue, and we wanted to maybe create a little bit more than we had here, but it was reporting on the dialogue that we had. So we trust that this session, too, has been another way of stimulating some of the ideas. And I thought it would be just neat to have Pastor Simon Peter conclude with a Pentecostal prayer for a reformed body so that we could be transformational.
We have a joke with Jim Silstra that he wants to make me reformed, and I have also made a goal and strategy that he becomes Pentecostal. And after all, he is married from Teso, so it's easier from our church that have given him a wife that we will make him a Pentecostal. So let's pray together. Lord, we run short of words to describe your very intelligent, wide, enlarged mind that is not limited in any way, and that you're perceiving things that we come behind in a slow speed and slow motion. And yet, Lord, you've moved ahead of us with a desire that we may grasp the width and the depth and the height of the love that you have for us. Help us, Holy Spirit, come through in understanding you. This assembly that you have engaged this week has come to know and to perceive that you have more in store for us in the 66 books that you have given to us, which is your Biblos. And your interaction with mankind for ages and ages and ages, which is endless because you've given us eternity ahead of us. But you want us to prepare for that eternity. You just don't want to bring us into heaven, but you also want to keep us here on earth, and that we are able to do and accomplish that which you have. I pray, Lord, for this assembly that the blessing of God, the wisdom of God, the Spirit of God will send us back into various continents where we live, and that we will be instruments in your very most holy hands to manifest your manifold wisdom and to bring forth your glory on earth just like it is in heaven, that the earth will be peaceful, the neighbors will live together, the children will find a place to play in, the poor will find encouragement, the sick will find healing, and the environment will be healthy. And even the animals you've created will find joy in living together. We pray, Lord, that this dream of Isaiah, the dream that you gave him, will come to pass one day when we can live together in peace. I pray for the entire world, to which you've commissioned us to be agents of change and agents of transformation. That God, in the struggles of it, you'll prepare us to accomplish this task. And that you'll give us wisdom as we move in. And that the Holy Spirit will touch us afresh again. Reform our hearts, transform our minds, transform us from the inside. That is the only way we can become agents of transformation. We want to be very grateful for our North American partners that have been able to hear from you and make all the plans that have been done here, and the discussions that have gone in this place, the dialogue. We pray that you bless every breath that has spoken forth. Put your anointing upon it, and may you receive glory and honor, and forever may Christ be crowned Lord and King, not only of heaven, but also of the universe.
In Jesus' name. Amen.
This wraps up the part for today, except for the picnic now in a little while, so that you can enjoy that. And then, of course, the concert tonight, Selah at Sunshine Church. Larry, the buses are at 6:30, and then it'll be coming back again, right? So if you're here at 6:30, you can catch a bus at the Commons. Okay. And where is that, sort of by the bookstore, or, okay. Right in front of the bookstore area, there will be a bus leaving for Sunshine Church, Selah concert at 6:30, and it will return there again if okay, all right. Okay, very good. Then, just in terms of preparing you for our tomorrow, we will have tables in some of the work areas that you've had the workshops in, and the topics like church planting, community transformation, justice. You'll have tables there so that we can look. We heard sort of a regional response today. We're going to take a look at sort of the sectoral response tomorrow yet before church. And then we have a wonderful worship service planned for you. Reverend Paul Mpindi is going to lead us with the word. We have a praise band coming in, and the intent is there to offer a unison prayer in all of the languages that are being spoken here and in the Lord's Prayer. That will be right here. That will be here. And so if you need some polishing up in your language on the Lord's Prayer, be prepared. And then we will also have just a line of prayer being offered in the various languages that are here. So those are some things that you can think about as we get ready for worship tomorrow and as we prepare for wrapping up that sectional on the sectors. So thank you very much. Larry?
Just a reminder of those that have displays set up that they should be removed at this point because the center will take down the tables.
Okay. Very good. And enjoy fellowship time. Is there some treats out there, Larry? Okay.